Hello, and welcome to Cellular Wisdom, where we dissect health myths with a scalpel and a smile. I'm Ethan Foster, your resident observer of the human condition and occasional curator of small but astute remarks on life.
And I'm Alara Sky, sharpening my mind and my tongue, so you don't have to. We're here to talk about health, natural remedies, and the peculiar ways we humans attempt to repair, rejuvenate, and rescue ourselves from our own questionable choices.
Today's topic, methylene blue, a substance that's been compared to a superhero for our cells, at least if I believe the chatter. But before we jump into the mechanics, did you ever imagine a scenario where you'd be discussing something that sounds like a fabric dye as a health supplement?
Actually, yes. My first foray into weird-sounding health claims was kombucha, which also sounds like a heavy metal band. But here we are. Methylene blue, an unlikely name for what some are calling an incredibly versatile compound.
Indeed. And from what I gather, Dr. Mercola, who is no stranger to natural health topics, has this new book out, which apparently is now a bestseller. In it, he dedicates a generous amount of ink to the wonders of methylene blue.
Ink to methylene blue. How fitting. We'll explore the bizarre yet compelling ways methylene blue can help our bodies. The science is surprisingly robust. It's not every day we find a substance that can, among other things, boost our mitochondria, help with neurological conditions, and even play a significant role during some pretty dire emergencies.
Let's start from the beginning. The big star in all of this is the mitochondrion, also known as the powerhouse of the cell. With methylene blue, the idea is that it supports mitochondrial function by stepping into the electron transport chain.
Right. That electron transport chain is like a little assembly line inside your cells, passing electrons along, so TH and eventually you generate ATP, the currency of energy in your body. Now, if that chain gets jammed, it's like a traffic snarl on a busy freeway. Methylene blue is the helpful tow truck that moves in to clear the wreckage and keep you cruising at 65 miles an hour instead of sitting in a long line of red brake lights.
Or, in my case, more of a peaceful 45 miles an hour, but I see the appeal. Methylene blue is described as a quinone-like molecule that can accept and donate electrons repeatedly. It's not one and done like some classic antioxidants.
Precisely. Most antioxidants donate an electron once and then retire gracefully. Methylene blue has no intention of retirement. It's the endless volunteer who keeps showing up to bake sales, rummage sales, and PTA meetings. It stays in the system, toggling between oxidized and reduced forms.
The benefit being that your cellular energy keeps flowing. In more advanced terms, it can help avoid something called reductive stress, where too many electrons build up in your system. But I'll leave that to the real experts.
I like your summary. Don't hoard electrons, share them. If we imagine Dr. Mercola's approach to it, he's saying that in everyday health and in emergencies, methylene blue provides a kind of safety net for your cells. It can bail them out when their usual co-actors like NAD+ are falling down on the job.
Let's talk about some of the conditions that might improve with methylene blue. Neurological health, for instance. There's been research showing that at doses as low as 15 to 50 milligrams a day, it may have a beneficial effect on things like depression and psychosis.
That's right. Also, there's a version of methylene blue developed in the UK, sometimes called hydromethylthionine, or LMTM. It's being studied for Alzheimer's disease. Apparently, some trials suggest a high percentage of participants with improved cognitive function. It's always wise to be skeptical of miracle percentages, but it's still pretty exciting.
Very. The clinical trials mention around 16 milligrams a day as a sweet spot for Alzheimer's. Interestingly, going higher doesn't produce a better effect. It's like wanting ice cream. A scoop might be perfect, but an entire gallon can be a disaster.
Precisely. And that's a critical point with methylene blue. More is better doesn't necessarily apply. You can get a plateau where beyond a certain point, you're not gaining anything additional, except maybe bluish bodily fluids or a misreading on a pulse oximeter.
Speaking of big health battles, we have septic shock, a grave condition that can occur during severe infections. Some systematic reviews suggest methylene blue might reduce the mortality rate in septic shock, help maintain blood pressure, and shorten hospital stays.
Right. In septic shock, the body's blood vessels can dilate excessively. Methylene blue steps in by inhibiting certain enzymes that perpetuate this runaway vasodilation, thereby restoring some vascular tone. Think of it as your personal crossing guard who prevents a stampede.
Absolutely. And as we continue to marvel at this compound, we see research also pointing toward cancer therapy, specifically for chemo-resistant ovarian tumors. According to certain mouse model studies, methylene blue suppressed tumor growth better than standard treatments.
Yes, though to be fair, it's not that we're telling everyone to ditch conventional cancer care in favor of dropping methylene blue capsules all day. But the data is intriguing. Methylene blue appears to selectively target cancer cell mitochondria, messing with the tumor's energy production while leaving normal cells relatively unscathed.
It's the difference between a hyper-focused approach and the usual scorched earth tactic. In this scenario, methylene blue is like a sniper, taking out the bad guys while minimizing collateral damage.
That's a great analogy for something as complex as cancer therapy. Now, let's move on to an even more dramatic scenario: heart attacks. Dr. Mercola mentions that having methylene blue on hand might be crucial if you're dealing with reperfusion injury.
Right? Reperfusion injury is that unfortunate turn of events when blood supply is restored to tissues after a period of ischemia, only to cause additional harm. Methylene blue could potentially help reduce that damage if administered quickly.
So if someone experiences a heart attack, Dr. Mercola suggests using a small dose, potentially under 50 milligrams, as soon as possible, time being of the essence. It's like having a fire extinguisher at home. Better to have it and never need it than to lack it in an emergency.
Precisely, and that principle extends to stroke scenarios as well. It's not that you just keep grabbing more and more, but in a crisis, every minute saved might preserve a chunk of heart or brain tissue.
Now it's also touted for anti-aging. Because of methylene blue's effect on mitochondria, it may slow cellular aging. Or so the lab data suggests. Some people combine it with red light therapy for a synergistic effect.
I like the phrase synergistic effect. It's a fancy way of saying that if you combine chocolate with peanut butter, you get something more magical than either one alone. Except in this case, it's methylene blue with red light, so it's probably not as tasty.
Possibly not. But from a cellular vantage point, it's delicious because improved mitochondrial efficiency plus photobiomodulation can amplify the benefits. People report looking younger, feeling more energetic, and in some cases, they use it as a mouthwash to harness antiseptic powers.
A methylene blue mouthwash. That's a conversation starter. Imagine dropping that in casual chat. Would you care for a swish of my special electron transport enhancer?
Be ready for the stares, though. Please step away from me, ma'am. But on a serious note, it can serve as an antibacterial agent without the typical harshness of certain commercial mouthwashes.
So it's strong enough to kill bacteria, but gentle enough for daily use. And of course, if you pair it with red light therapy on your face while you rinse, you'll look like a tech-savvy ghost at a futuristic spa.
Precisely. We mustn't forget that while methylene blue might be versatile, there are cautions around dosage, especially because it's a potent MAOA inhibitor. If someone's on certain antidepressants, you don't want that to lead to serotonin overload.
Exactly. In that scenario, you'd risk something known as serotonin syndrome, which is no joke. Another caution is for people with G6PD deficiency. Methylene blue can cause serious problems for those folks, so vigilance is needed.
Dr. Mercola does mention that daily doses of 5 to 15 milligrams are fairly common. Some might go up to 50, but that can cause your urine to turn blue and might not yield additional benefits. Everyone's always concerned when they see a surprising color in the toilet bowl.
Indeed. Might make for an interesting conversation with your plumber, or at least a good anecdote. By the way, Doc, is it normal to look like I spilled ink?
Methylene blue does have that side effect, but side effects aside, it's widely considered safe at modest doses. Its track record in serious conditions like septic shock is encouraging, and it's used clinically for things like certain poisonings. Cyanide, for instance.
Yes, it's known to help the body utilize oxygen better when those toxins compromise your respiratory system. The idea is that methylene blue can play an emergency role in restoring your cell's ability to make energy.
Now, Dr. Mercola also suggests something called the methylene blue test of health, not to be confused with your typical blood test. In his discussion with Georgi Dinkov, the idea is that you find out at what dose your urine starts turning blue. A lower threshold indicates you're in good metabolic shape.
So if a mere 5 milligrams is enough to see some blue hue, you might be relatively healthy. But if you're taking higher amounts and you still see no color change, it might point to deeper metabolic problems. Or maybe you're just wearing color-changing pants, but that's less likely.
The color-changing pants would be far more entertaining, though. But that's the general idea. It's a quirky but interesting proxy test. Just understand that, as with all things in life, interpretation should be guided by context.
Now, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that methylene blue comes in different grades: industrial, chemical, and pharmaceutical. The takeaway? You want pharmaceutical grade. You absolutely don't want to pick up an aquarium version, swirl it in water, and gulp it down.
No, you don't want aquarium-grade anything in your mouth. That's about as appealing as tasting the fishbowl water after Nemo's had a bad night. Also, Dr. Mercola notes that even a standard methylene blue solution can degrade in water after a couple of days, so it might lose potency.
Precisely. That's why some prefer tablets or capsules that are properly made. Now, Dr. Mercola himself says he's cut back on routine use because he enjoys daily walks by the ocean. He believes that helps his metabolism and stress levels naturally.
That's a peaceful choice. Yet, if he couldn't get to the beach, he'd consider a small daily dose. It's interesting to see how he tailors his approach to real life. Not everything has to be complicated. A walk on the beach might do wonders.
I believe him. The sound of the waves is quite soothing, and if that fails, you can imagine the wave is gently telling your electrons to keep moving in the right direction.
Then maybe a small dose of methylene blue if you need it. But the moral of the story is that you want to keep your mitochondria humming, and methylene blue can be one tool.
And if you do use it, you aim for a prescription-grade product, not a shady online source that might mix it with questionable substances.
Yes. I don't relish the idea of heavy metals with my methylene blue. That's like spiking your smoothie with rusty nails.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Let's shift to something that might spark interest in people who read the popular press: the anti-aging angle. Dr. Mercola and Georgi Dinkov mention that some cell-based studies suggest it can reduce markers of aging in human cells.
It's about reducing oxidative damage and boosting energy output. If your cells function better, they're less prone to premature senescence, that cell retirement phase where they stop dividing and basically become old codgers sitting in a corner, complaining about the good old days.
And what's interesting is how it can partner with red light therapy. Red light therapy alone has been credited with everything from improved skin elasticity to hair regrowth. Combine that with methylene blue, and you've got a potential dynamic duo for more youthful cells.
Of course, no one is claiming it's a fountain of youth in a bottle, but it's certainly a tool that might help tip the scales in favor of healthier aging. I imagine biohackers out there are swirling these combos like mad scientists.
Indeed. How many lasers and dyes can we combine for maximum longevity? That's a rhetorical question, folks.
I love rhetorical questions. Let's move on to emergency kits. Dr. Mercola advocates keeping methylene blue around if you can, because you never know when you might need its life-saving potential. Heart attack, stroke, severe poisonings. These are not times to run to the store. Preparation is everything.
Right. And apparently it's not only humans. Some veterinarians might use it for animals in certain cases, though obviously you'd want to check with the appropriate professionals for those specifics.
Indeed. Let's not pivot to a strange side hustle of doping up your iguana with methylene blue. But it's nice to know there's a broad safety profile and possible uses beyond standard scenarios.
Another thing that intrigues me is how methylene blue might function as an aromatase inhibitor at minuscule concentrations. That could have hormone balancing implications, especially for those dealing with estrogen-dominant conditions.
Right. Hormones are powerful chemicals in our body, so even a small shift can matter. If methylene blue can help modulate that enzyme, it might assist in rebalancing certain hormonal states. But obviously, that's more research-oriented for now.
Also, a note on dosage. We've discussed that typically somewhere in the 5 to 15 milligrams daily range is what many professionals recommend for maintenance. If you go beyond 50 milligrams, you risk some funky side effects and a higher chance of drug interactions.
That's where your plumber and your pulse oximeter might both get confused. Always remember that just because a little helps doesn't mean a lot helps more. We know that's not the approach in this case.
Precisely. And if you're one of those people who's on certain SSRIs, you definitely want to be cautious because of that MAOA inhibition. There's a reason doctors pay attention to drug interactions.
Absolutely. Let's also mention that while it can keep you physiologically stable, if you have kidney issues, you might want to be careful. The kidneys do the job of clearing substances, and if they're not functioning at their best, you'd want a second opinion or some close observation.
In short, for most healthy individuals, a small dose can be beneficial. But if there's something like G6PD deficiency or serious renal insufficiency, the approach might differ. Everyone's different, so nuance is key.
That's right. Now, people might wonder, how does Dr. Mercola himself integrate methylene blue into his life? From what I've gleaned, he mostly focuses on lifestyle choices that minimize oxidative stress. The ocean walks, the sunshine, presumably a good diet. Then, methylene blue is more of an on-the-go insurance policy if needed.
Which is refreshing to hear. Sometimes we think about these protocols as daily absolutes, but a flexible approach can be more realistic. If you can manage your health with simpler means, great. If not, here's a powerful tool to consider.
Exactly. That's a fundamental point. Methylene blue is not the foundation of a healthy life, but it can be part of the scaffolding. Priorities often revolve around sleep, diet, stress management, and activity levels. Then you add something like methylene blue if there's a situation or particular reason.
Indeed. Another aspect is that some people do methylene blue cycling, meaning they might take it a few days a week rather than every single day, especially for longer-term use. That can help manage any potential buildup or side effects.
Right. Like the concept of giving your body a breather. And because it can remain active in its electron toggling form, you probably don't need it saturating your system 24/7.
Also, there's a mention that Dr. Mercola no longer takes it daily, so that's an example of how a person's routine can evolve. Maybe he used it regularly at one stage of his health journey, and later found he didn't need as much.
Yes, or maybe he realized that a daily ocean stroll was enough to offset the electron stress. The ocean's a powerful place. By the way, next time you see someone on the beach wearing a t-shirt that says, "I walk for better mitochondrial health, wave hello," they might be a Dr. Mercola fan.
I'll keep an eye out. Now, if folks listening are curious about what else methylene blue can do, it also helps fish in aquariums. But that's a separate grade. We can't stress enough. Do not ingest aquarium-grade methylene blue.
Yes, please no doping your fish or yourself with the aquarium solution. Marine life can benefit from that specific product in their watery environment, but you do not want to piggyback on that. They're fish, you're not.
And aquarium grade may contain heavy metals or other contaminants, not recommended for your system.
Precisely. Now, one of the cooler things is how quick methylene blue can be in emergency settings. If you suspect carbon monoxide poisoning or cyanide poisoning, hospital protocols might involve intravenous methylene blue to help oxygenate tissues.
That's a lifesaver scenario, literally. If you look at the mechanism, it's like a temporary jump start to get your energy production back online, because those poisons hamper your cells from using oxygen.
Exactly. It's akin to reviving a dying phone battery. But here, the phone is your cells, and the charger is a single molecule bouncing electrons around.
Very poetic. So we see it at the far ends of the medical spectrum, from daily mild maintenance all the way to severe poisoning interventions. That's quite a range for one compound.
Not many substances can claim that. Usually it's either an everyday multivitamin or an ICU medication. Here we have this interesting overlap.
And let's not forget that in Dr. Mercola's coverage, he references Georgi Dinkov quite a bit. Dinkov, known for metabolic health expertise, emphasizes that methylene blue can rescue cells from the burden of too many electrons piling up. especially if NAD plus is in short supply.
Right. The typical mindset is, we need more electrons, more antioxidants. But the real problem can sometimes be too many electrons not going anywhere, which is that reductive stress. Methylene blue becomes that bus that ferries them to their destination.
Exactly. So, for a typical person, if you're living a healthy lifestyle, you might not need methylene blue every day. But if you're dealing with a condition like depression, cognitive decline, or just want an edge in cellular resilience, it might be worth exploring.
That's the gist. And we might see more on that synergy with nutrients like niacinamide, vitamin B3. Some findings suggest that methylene blue plays nicely with niacinamide to boost brain metabolism.
Another synergy to look out for. We all just want synergy. That might be the tagline for the modern health world.
Indeed. And while synergy is the name of the game, caution is the subheader. Because if you're combining too many things that also modulate serotonin, or if you have underlying conditions, well, synergy might become chaos.
Well put. So, recapping for our listeners, methylene blue can help with mitochondrial efficiency, neurological conditions, septic shock, potential anti-cancer effects, and even anti-aging. It's not a cure-all, but it's a heavy hitter in certain scenarios.
Right. And it might also stain your mouth, your urine, or your sink. So just be prepared for a bit of color in your life. But perhaps that's a small price to pay if it's helping you out in a pinch.
Absolutely. One question I foresee is, where do I even get this magical stuff? Since we can't give brand endorsements here, the simplest route is to consult with someone who can prescribe pharmaceutical-grade methylene blue, or find a reliable supplier who sells it in capsule form, not an aquarium store.
And if you do, pay attention to storage and usage, because if you mix it in water and let it sit for days, you might have less potency. Or if you just toss it on a shelf in a hot garage, the composition could change.
Good point. Another angle people might wonder about is whether it can help them fight infections beyond septic shock. While there's some antiseptic potential, it's typically overshadowed by the big roles we've mentioned. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that it has broader applications.
Definitely. Even Dr. Mercola mentions mouthwash uses, so that's already an example of a more local antibacterial effect. But folks usually focus on the deeper cellular benefits.
Now, if we think about the broad picture, it's about assisting that electron transport chain, supporting the energy currency in your cells, and addressing metabolic blocks. That's beneficial for a ton of processes, from cognition to circulation.
Precisely. And that's why a lot of people in the integrative health space are so excited. It's not every day you find something that addresses a fundamental process that underpins many functions, from your brain to your heart to your liver.
I like that we've managed to cover all of that while keeping it somewhat lighthearted. Mitochondria can be a bit of a dry subject if you read the typical biology textbook, but it's critical stuff.
Dry? Mitochondria? That's comedic gold right there, Ethan. Mitochondria are the beating heart of the cell. They're little nuclear reactors. How can that be dull?
I stand corrected. My old biology teacher would be proud that we're singing the praises of these tiny organelles. Now, do you have a final message about methylene blue for those who might be on the fence?
My final message is, if you're intrigued, do a bit more reading, talk to a professional, and see if it fits your life. Don't fear the blue factor. Embrace the possibility that your cells might get a jolt of energy. Just keep the dosage reasonable.
Well said. As for me, I appreciate any therapy that can do double duty, triple duty, or quadruple duty without requiring me to hold my breath, stand on one leg, and chant at midnight. Methylene blue seems to fit that bill. A welcome multitasker in our health arsenal.
Absolutely. And it's been fascinating to watch how Dr. Mercola's deeper dive with Georgi Dinkoff has highlighted all these aspects. It reminds us that many mainstream folks haven't caught up yet, but the research is there.
Indeed, because let's face it, conventional medicine often addresses disease after it starts. But if there's a compound that can keep your mitochondria on track, maybe that's the real definition of prevention.
Exactly. Prevention that doesn't rely on fear or hype, but on Cell Biology 101. That's the sweet spot in holistic health.
Couldn't agree more. And with that, folks, we bring this episode of Cellular Wisdom to a close. We've taken a scenic route around the fascinating territory of methylene blue.
Yes, we did. We hope you gleaned some insights and had a few chuckles along the way. If you find yourself explaining electron transport chain function to your friends at the next dinner party, we'll consider our job done.
And if you slip a little mention of methylene blue synergy with red light therapy, well, your dinner guests might stare, but you'll be the life of the party, or at least the official health guru for the evening.
Let them stare. We'll just wave politely and hand them the spool of disclaimers about synergy and dosage. Actually, never mind. We can just keep it simple. Methylene blue. It's not just for fish tanks, folks.
That's a memorable line if ever there was one. Thanks for tuning in to Cellular Wisdom, everyone. Join us next time when we dissect yet another health topic with that same scalpel and smile approach.
Indeed. Until then, stay curious, stay healthy, and remember, your cells appreciate a little TLC. Whether you give that to them via a beach walk, a balanced lifestyle, or the carefully measured magic of methylene blue, you do have options.
Well said. Signing off, I'm Ethan Foster.
And I'm Alara Sky. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Cellular Wisdom.